Remember when Fortnite was good? Now, some of you who play the game still nowadays consistently probably do still think it's a good game, and I would actually agree with you. I still think that it's a fine game, and I can still kind of have fun with it when I, play it from time to time. But remember when it was, like, really good? And I'm talking seasons 2 through 8 of Chapter 1. While some of you may think that there have been seasons, like, in between those seasons that I just mentioned, like, in the future, that beat out one of those seasons individually throughout that time period. But I don't think there was ever a time in Fortnite's like lifespan where the game was consistently like as good as it was for that long. Now, some people may look at this video as me only being kind of nostalgia biased, but I really don't think it is. So this video is going to be about a few things. One, my experience with competitive Fortnite and just Fortnite in general and what it did for me. Two, where I think the game started to lose its footing. Three, how the game made changes that I think negatively affected what made the game so fun to begin with, and those changes would stick with the game for a long time and even to this day. And four, what I think Fortnite should ideally be, like what I think the perfect version of the game would be. But I think I should start this video off by giving some context for my experience with Fortnite, as I feel like it's the most important thing as to why I hold this opinion. I also do want to clarify that my problems that I bring up in this video are a mix of, like, I feel like 60% personal things and 40% things that I think are just objective issues. So I just wanted to clarify that, but let's get into it. So I thank this game a lot for what it did for me as a person and becoming more mature than I was before I started, taking it seriously. And you might be thinking it's a game that doesn't make any sense, but just let me explain. I started playing Fortnite midway through Season 3 on my PS4. Now, I knew what Fortnite was before I started playing it, but I didn't really give it, like, a chance to, like, play it consistently until Season 3. I even played it in Season 2 before, but I kind of played it like 3 games and then never played it again until Season 3. But once I picked it up and, gave it a consistent chance, I was immediately hooked. I played the game pretty casually for around 5 seasons after this, all the way up to Season 8. And during this time, I got pretty good. Definitely not like one of the best in the world or anything, but I would say I was better than a lot of people who did play the game, as I would basically stomp out every lobby that I was in. At this time, I also did Instagram and YouTube pretty casually, where I would just upload clips and make like funny moments videos, all of which are either now gone or unlisted.
Oh my fucking god, I'm a fucking beast! Get the fuck off me, yo! Oh my god! I'm a fucking beast! Get the fuck off me! I'm a fucking god, yo!
Oh my god, dude. My wall now, boy.
I'm just a with a rocket launcher.
I'm gonna get this. Please, I want you to peek me one more time. Just do it for the sake. Oh, you're dead.
Which is why some of the clips that I might show in this video are probably gonna be, like low quality, because some of them are gonna be coming from my Instagram. So sorry about that. But when Season 8 came around and Arena was introduced and open tournaments were being announced with massive payouts for placing highly, this is when I started to take the game seriously, because it was unlike other competitive games where like you needed an invite to a tournament to actually have a chance to make money. Any regular guy could hop on their PC or console. You probably wouldn't do anything if you're on console, but any regular guy could have a chance to compete and, make a name for themselves, which was kind of like unlike any other game ever did. But I started taking this game seriously because I was already really good at the time for a console player, and I got even better once I got a scuff controller with back paddles, because, it helped me be more mechanical, as well as keeping like my aim better when I could do things like editing and jumping. And I wanted to make money because my family at the time was really broke. Not like starving or anything, but financially it was rough living in a house with a single mom taking care of 5 people, including herself. And this game actually put me on the right track in life, kind of, as before I started taking it seriously, I was out smoking or drinking almost every day. I had no goals for what I wanted to do with my future. I was an absolute asshole, way more than I can be nowadays. I got into fights a lot. I was basically a crash out, and I grew up in a pretty shitty environment that is still like a part of my personality to this day. But when I started taking this game seriously, the most important thing that I learned, or the thing that it taught me and what it gave to me, was the chance to have a goal and really have the chance to chase it to get myself where I wanted to be. I played basketball, which was probably the closest thing I ever got to that before this, but I was like fucking 5'3" as a freshman, so that shit was cooked. But this game was also an escape from my real life that also gave me the chance to help my mom financially. Anyways, when Season 8 rolled around, I started playing Arena, which started off pretty intense. finals, and then it fizzled out into me and whoever I played with just W keying everyone and rolling through lobbies. Me and my cousin started practicing doing scrims, which simulated tournament lobbies for tournaments like World Cup and Cash Cups. When World Cup did roll around, I was still on console for pretty like 8 weeks of it. And if you don't know how the weeks worked, it was basically, you know, Saturday and Sunday was semifinals and finals, and if you made it to a certain position in finals, then you made $50,000 just regularly, and you could make even more at New York where World Cup was. But me being on console for 80% of World Cup obviously put me at a huge disadvantage, and I would miss out on qualifying for finals by 5 points or less every week, which I would still say was pretty good being on console. But my mom was doing her best to help me get a PC, so when she saved up enough, I sold some things of mine, including my PS4, and I eventually built my own PC about a day before week 9, so a day before Saturday and Sunday of week 9. And that week, I still had to get used to PC because I did slightly of higher frame rates, and the input lag was nowhere near like it was on console, so that I had to get used to that. Even though it did feel better, still had to get used to it. And I didn't even actually have more than 75 FPS due to the fact that I still only had a 75 hertz monitor, so I was still at a pretty big disadvantage. And I, again, for the final 2 weeks, didn't qualify by finals by 2 points. And this was really rough for me because I spent so much time and it felt like it amounted to nothing. And they didn't really announce anything for a while after World Cup, but they finally did right before Season X. So I kept going during this stretch. This would also be when I came to not be playing Fortnite because I thought the game was still steadily improving and as fun as it was in the earlier seasons beforehand. But I was only playing it as much as I did because I was still really good at it, and I was able to contend with some of the best players in the world in stuff like wagers and scrims.
A 101, knock.
My box. Oh, I'm dead.
Fuck, dude.
Bacon. Nice, good.
Bro, what?
AP cracks buns. Nice.
These guys have the most cracked fucking hair shots, dude.
Look at I hit for 100.
Oh, in my box, am I already switched lows?
You're taking my
I knocked one.
Just jumps into my fucking box.
Yo,
That's literally all these kids
easy,
do, bro.
easy.
I swear.
Keep on throwing one keep on showing ass. Bitches on my body and I'm just trying to relax. They always come up with it. I'm eating.
Hit for 70, aura. I got him. 77.
Oh, that's Kiwi face.
On me, I need help.
God, I can never let her. My ex about me, bitch, I'm doing better. I'm dripping and drowning up in any water.
No! Zach, come out. Zach. I went to save you, man. Need help.
This kid on ping. 50. Oh shit, I just... Holy fuck.
Get out of here, you're trash.
Yo, what's up, Dutchy?
Why did I just jump?
What's up, Python?
I'm doing it just like this first. Yeah.
No.
Wow. Just fell through and into a literally 200 pump. Feels good, man. Because one pump 3 dudes.
How does it feel getting one pumped by a controller player and a stepdad?
And he's a stepdad.
Yeah, and he's a stepdad.
Wait, knock.
Two.
Knocked another one. I just killed Slackle's reverse and symphony. I just scored my.
Oh no! No, bro. That sucks. He's gonna full kill. Try to pump him. Yeah. Try to pump him. Yeah.
50. Oh my. Why am I fast?
Oh my
god.
I don't know.
I don't-
had nothing. So we go again.
Bro. No, you do that shit, bro. What the fuck am I fighting? Now I'm gonna run away. That's a kid I was fighting. That's the biggest pussy in that Nate region. I'm just gonna get a really good beam on him. Yeah, that's a crack. Oh my god, third party? Why wouldn't there be a third party, chat? I'm fucking dead. Oh my god, this shit's actually so stupid.
But now that I've laid out a little bit of that context that I will go through more later in terms of my experience with the game, this is where I'm going to start talking about the changes that the game started to make, where I started to slowly hate playing it. Maybe hate's a strong word, but slowly my experience and fun with the game just deteriorated. So after World Cup, Trios FNCS came around, but during that time, there was also some really bad things that started to happen for both the game and for me being able to actually play the game. So first things first, I want to take it back a bit to Season 9, which was still when World Cup was going on. This season was already a step in the wrong direction in my opinion, but it was still a pretty solid season. My problem with Season 9 was the combat shotgun was pretty like weak and felt really like it was just worse than the pump, and even after it got updated to get better, it still was just worse than the pump, so it just felt like a downgrade for no reason. And I'm gonna say this now, every single season where Epic got rid of the pump shotgun fucking blew my shit, because the gunplay will never be better than it was with the pump. There is still yet to be a shotgun that has rivaled the pump in terms of like how smooth and consistent the gameplay felt, as well as just the pace of that gameplay. The Storm Flip was also an item introduced this season, and it was broken, especially in competitive. The Proximity Launcher was a brain dead gun that also should have never been in competitive, and the new POIs they added made building really weird in those areas due to how they were designed. I can't really explain it as well as I want to because I don't have access to Futuristic Tilted and Retail Row, but all I can say is the interiors of those buildings had a lot of areas where building could get easily scuffed, and you could lose fights in really unlucky ways because of it, which was kind of annoying. And then my final problem with Season 9 was the ballers, for those of you that remember that, because if you didn't have one of these things in competitive, then you were just at a blatant, like, huge disadvantage when it came to placing higher in those games than people who did have them. And I don't mind games having metas. I think the problem that happened with a lot of later Fortnite seasons after Chapter 1, the problem is when a specific tactic or item is so broken that it gives you such a big advantage over players that don't have it. I don't mind the loot pool, like, you know, a gold scar is obviously better than a green AR, but you can still compete against a gold scar with a green AR. It's not like you were automatically gonna lose that fight. The only real improvement that I thought Season 9 made over Season 8 was the wind tunnels, but other than that, Season 8 was better in like every other aspect, so I thought Season 9 was like a 7.5 out of 10 on the competitive side of things. But then Season X came around, which was Season 10 of Chapter 1, and this season was a fucking shit show. First things first, the mechs. The mechs alone bring this season down to like a 7 out of 10 for me. Like, even casual players absolutely hated these things, and for some reason Epic never got rid of them, even in competitive, which was fucking brain dead. The most we got was a nerf to the mechs in like the final week of FNCS, but it's not just the mechs. The loot pool was also fucking awful compared to the other seasons. The RNG was actually terrible. There were 5 different pistols, only 3 of which were like actually viable. So only 3 of those were actually viable, and one of those 2, being the revolver, was literally just a worse version of the deagle. So you basically had 7 weapons if we include the rarity of them, 7 item spawns that could spawn that were just bad weapons compared to the meta weapons in the game. You had 5 different ARs, the scoped AR being useless, and the suppressed scar was just worse than basically all of the ARs except for the common one because the bloom was just so awful. And every other AK except for the blue one was also just not really better than the regular green ARs, but there was also no real reason to pick an AK over an infantry rifle, as they basically had the same fire rate and the infantry rifle did more damage and was more accurate. So we had 10 for 16 in the AR category that were viable, viable. All of the snipers were pretty viable except for the semi-auto. That shit was garbage no matter what rarity it was. Obviously, the heavy sniper was the best and gave you the most value for multiple different uses, like jumping in boxes, double heavy snipe, rocket launcher heavy snipe, and of course the fact that it did over 150 damage to the body. It was pretty broken, which I think was a problem that later seasons fixed, making it not be able to one-shot break like any builds like it could previously. But while it was way better than all the other snipers were still pretty viable considering the fact that all of them could one-shot you. So it's not as big a deal as the next category, and that's the special weapons. And I literally, like, the only one of these that wasn't broken was the rocket launcher, because you could actually, like, it wasn't that hard to counter. It could still be annoying, but like you compare it to like the grenade launcher, which made you waste so many resources, or like the minigun did the same thing. And the worst thing about those two weapons is that even when you try to defend yourself by building, you could still get shot through your builds easily with the minigun, and the grenade launcher would shoot so many that all of them did over 100 damage, and it was super hard to keep track of. So in this category alone, we had 5 broken weapon spawns, 7 if we include the heavy sniper. And then moving to the shotguns and SMGs, pretty much all of these are viable except for the common tac and like common silence SMG. But the gold and purple tac SMG were both broken as fuck. Like, they were basically miniguns that needed to be reloaded more often, and they were more accurate, and they also didn't have a delay for shooting.
Oh, cool. Right. Oh, that's a fair and balanced gun. Fair and balanced. Fair.
And then in the heals and utility category, the only thing that was not viable is bandages. Like, the thing that you don't want to be holding is bandages. And the only thing that was broken was the junk rift. That thing did way too much damage. It went through builds, it made you waste resources, and it gave you like no time to react. And they never took this out of competitive, which was stupid as fuck. So looking at the loot pool, we have 41 out of 59 actually viable weapons, 9 of those being broken weapons. And most of the healing and utility was useful, with only 1 not being very viable and 1 being broken. But there were certain utility items that were just straight up way better than others. 1, chug splashes were just the best healing item in the game. It can heal a whole team and they work super quickly. 2, launch pads gave you a huge advantage for endgame competitive lobbies. They are the best utility item in the game. But I wouldn't say they were broken, because you can still be shot out of the air and they didn't affect other people in most situations. If anything, other people could actually use your launch pads if you did. So I wouldn't say they were very broken. They still gave you a really big advantage though. But they also had downsides to, you know, mediate that. 3, shockwave grenades were absolutely the best physical utility item to hold in terms of stuff that took up inventory space, because they can be used for both winning fights and for movement. So as you can see, the loot pool this season was like all fucking over the place. And when I say certain weapons aren't viable, what I really mean is while you can get a kill with them, you're either gonna have a much harder time with it in comparison to other weapons used for similar things or other weapons in its category. Like, for example, if you were fighting someone who has a green pump and an AR, while you have a common tac shotgun and the same AR, the person with the green pump has a much higher chance of winning that fight if they're the same skill level. Whereas if you had the green tac, which kills in fewer shots than a common one, then the guy with the green pump would still have the advantage, but the guy with the green tac has a much better chance at winning that fight than if they had a common tac, which is why I think the common tac just isn't very viable. And while this can be more nuanced because there's so many different weapons and situations that you can be in, like someone could bring up that since the gold tac is so much better than the green or blue tac, wouldn't that make the green or blue tac also inviable? I would say no, because most of the time you're not running into someone with a gold tac, as it's a rare item. So hopefully that makes sense. But you can compare that loot pool to anything in between seasons 2 and 8, and I feel like it's just obvious which has the more, like, the better and more balanced loot pool in comparison. And there were some things that Fortnite would separate between the competitive and quick play loot pools, but this season it's like they just did not care. And I think that things like the grenade launcher, for example, is more balanced in public matches, because while it can still be used to win fights in pubs, like easier, public matches don't have 50 to 70 people still alive in the 3rd and 4th storm circles. So you can imagine the problem with having a weapon like a grenade launcher in those circumstances when it's already hectic enough. Like if someone shot like 3 grenade launcher bullets at you, that immediately drew attention to you. So you could start getting, you know, third-party AR shots from another team, and if the person who shot the grenade launcher sees that, then they could keep shooting their grenade launcher at you, and it was just like, why is that in the game? And that thing had 16 fucking shots. But it wasn't just the loot pool that Season X had problems with. It was also the stupid-ass POI changes that would happen during FNCS too. So people had to constantly adapt to something changing in this season, which made it fucking hell. People who practiced landing tilted now probably wanted to change because they turned it into an area where you couldn't build, which is, you know, a massive part of the gameplay and skill of the game. And don't even get me started on what fighting was like in Tilted Town during competitive endgames. People who landed greasy before may have wanted to change that because they made it to something where you would randomly start dancing with tacos, causing some really unlucky deaths because of randomization, which is just like stupid. People who landed retail might wanted to change that because they don't want zombie AIs that could come in and third party along with other people that landed there. And the worst part about these POIs was that they had the best loot. So it was either you put up with the bullshit and adapt immediately to have the best chance at winning, or you can land somewhere else and adapt to that new drop spot because you want the game to still feel more comfortable with what you're used to. It's a similar situation to the Infinity Blade in Season 7 where they added this right before a major tournament, and this happened.
Poach isn't gonna get top 10. Poach just died. Oh my god, Poach.
He's just breaking it up though. He's not even really fighting players. Oh, this player's gonna get it.
Oh, poor
There it
Finn.
is.
Oh, that
That's
was
all
Predator.
him.
No, you're not the Predator, bud. He is. Psalm is a Predator.
What do you mean by that?
Another one's going to be right in front of him. Some defense coming through here, but what are you going to be able to do? You're just cutting through the structures, and Uzi falls to the Infinity Blade.
There it is. See, he's looking to break the structures that are connecting these high ground players so he can pick up more elims too from the fall damage.
Gonna get another one here. He's gonna be trapped inside of the storm, though.
Doesn't matter. He can.
Oh my
where
god!
He wants to be right now. He
Another
someone
elimination.
else.
He's on a killing spree. Oh
crushing
my
players.
word! He has picked up 8 eliminations, 10 eliminations.
He's a god!
Anymore. This is Psalm's world, and we're just merely living in it.
Oh, the guy fell.
That's
They're all
number
just
11.
falling.
Because he's creating so much carnage.
Here's
He's creating so
another
much
one.
carnage. He got another one. Bizzle. The Infinity Blade is too good. It's so powerful.
He is jumping.
Like, it really is just unfair to people who spend so long working at something to just throw a curveball in their face so often. And this was a big problem in Season 10. To not just me, but a lot of other people in both the competitive and casual parts of the fan base. And I think that even people who landed at these POIs and excelled in tournaments doing that would probably agree that these POI changes and specific things that happened, like taco time and zero builds and zombies, made fighting in these areas just feel worse. And from my personal experience in competitive this season, outside of all the things that I've mentioned that I had problems with the game side of things, for 3 out of 5 of the weeks of Trios FNCS, while I did make it to top 500 every week, 2 out of 5 of those top 500 placements being in semifinals as well, for 3 out of 5 of those weeks of Trios FNCS, I couldn't play on my SCUF controller. And this controller was the bane of my existence for my entire time playing competitive Fortnite pretty much. So for context, this was me when I got that controller for the first time, and I was like 14 years old at the time you're watching this, like when I recorded this video.
I got that scum. Join that bitch clean. Hold on. See this? This ain't no more. No, this ain't an option. No, like this. No!
That SCUF controller turned me from being good at the game to being able to compete with some of the best players in the world good at the game. And in pretty much every single major tournament that happened, and even for a lot of cash cups, this controller was broken. This thing broke at least once every 2 to 3 weeks, and you might think that it was my fault, but like, no, it really wasn't. I never threw my controller or anything like that. I just used it normally how you would use your controller. And it was the same thing that broke every time. It was the paddle that I used to edit. And mind you, this controller was $180 and I had it for about a year and a half and it broke 15 times probably in that lifespan. And every time it broke, I had to wait 2 weeks for it to come back from being fixed by the warranty. So I had to adapt between using a normal controller that made me so much worse at the game and the controller that actually allowed me to be great very frequently. And I could really never find my footing on the competitive side of things for this very reason. It's not like I never made money playing this game, as the majority of the money that I did make from Fortnite came from playing wagers and not tournaments. I still placed really highly sometimes, but to this day I still wonder how things could have gone fun if that controller never broke. And that was another big reason why I quit the game. But I mean, even dealing with that, I still placed like top 500 in a lot of tournaments. I still remember when I stupidly put my phone number as my username, and I did this because it would be funny when people would kill, or like I would kill people and they would call me to talk shit. But anyways, I wound up placing 15th in that tournament that I played, and I literally could not use my phone because I got called at least 1,000 times for the next 2 days of that. But now that I've talked about 2 seasons where chapter 1 started to fall off for me, what do I think about chapter 2 seasons 1 through 3? Because that's when I quit the game for a while. I kind of quit like mid or like towards the beginning of chapter 2 season 4. I didn't think chapter 2 season 4 was a bad season, but I was already kind of done with the game at that point when that season came around, so I didn't really care. But I'm gonna talk briefly about what I think was good and bad about these 3 seasons. But I do want to preface that I don't think any of these seasons beat seasons 2 through 8 of chapter 1 still, and that's for a few reasons that I will get into as I go through the seasons. So chapter 2 season 1. This season started off really strong for me.
Hey, hold on. Let me get a little slap.
Hey! I loved the new map. I loved the new element of fishing, which reduced RNG when it came to having healing items and even weapons. The loot pool was a big improvement over the previous 2 seasons. The majority of the weapons in the loot pool were viable to the point where I could even say it was on par with a lot of the seasons in between, like chapter 1 seasons 2 through 8. Controller players got a huge upgrade with the addition of customizing building sensitivity versus aiming sensitivity, as well as aim assist and aim settings overall getting improved. And some salty mouse and keyboard players may say that it was broken, which they kind of had a point, but only in season 2, but we'll get to that when we get there. They added upgrade benches, which allowed you to trade materials for weapon upgrades, which again reduced RNG, and I thought this was a really good improvement. I even placed top 100 in the first solo cash cup of this season, and I could have actually made money in this cash cup in my final game. I still remember to this day, I had 2 slurp fishes, 6 minis, a scar, a gold pump, and a sniper. The perfect setup for a win, until my game crashed and I made no money.
Yes, sirree. Thought about killing myself.
But overall, this season started off really strong, but that doesn't mean that I don't think it had a few issues on a personal and objective level. Firstly, I hated squads FNCS, not only as competitive, already a cluster fucking endgames, but on top of that, you were in teams of 4, which made it way too chaotic in my opinion. And it was kind of unfair for us players who didn't have much popularity in the competitive scene, because it was already hard enough finding people who were around your skill level as a good duo or trio in previous events. So it was even harder to find a great team in squads. The next problem that plagued pretty much this whole season was the lack of movement options, paired with the fact that the map was just bigger now, and it also had a lot of water-filled areas and more mountainous areas. There was also a change to the pump, which I still think to this day is one of the dumbest changes they ever made, because they basically changed how the pump worked at lower rarities, and it became less balanced. Basically, if you didn't have a purple or gold pump, and you were going against someone who did, you were at a massive disadvantage, because the lower rarity pumps not only had a bigger spread, which means it had less range, and it was harder to hit full damage headshots, but none of them could one-shot people anymore. Mind you, I never minded the gold pump and purple pump in earlier seasons, but that was because the blue and green pumps were still perfectly usable against those. Even if the green pump couldn't one-shot, it could still basically one-shot. It did 195 damage to the head, and it didn't have a different spread as a purple or gold pump, so you weren't at such a big disadvantage. They also downgraded the art style in my opinion this season, and that's something that the game never stopped doing as the years went on. Even to this day, I think the game looks massively worse because of like they tried to go all hyper realism. Maybe not hyper realism, but they tried to make the game look way more realistic, and I think the art style suffered for it. The next problem, and I know I mentioned that fishing was a great mechanic, and I still think that it is, but the slurp fish was a broken healing item, as you could carry 4 of them at the time, and that gave you 200 health in 4 seconds, which is just insane. But perhaps the biggest problem with this season was the content updates, because goddamn they were slow. There's a lot of stretches during this season that were just kind of getting stale, and it wasn't even just not them having like, you know, updates with new items or blah blah blah. There was also not a lot of tournaments in this season compared to the next 2 seasons. But looking back on it now, this season was still great. I still struggle to say that it was as good as any of the seasons between chapter 1, season 2 and 8, or seasons 2 through 8. But the thing I still respect about this season was, at its core, it still kept what made Fortnite Fortnite great in those earlier seasons, being the simplicity. And now we get to Chapter 2 Season 2, the season that, while I would still say it had some of the best stuff Fortnite ever added, it's also the season that started my issues with every Fortnite season that followed. Starting off first with the NPCs. I fucking despise these things. I never stopped hating them. It's already annoying to deal with getting third-partied in this game, and I think everyone can relate to that. But getting third-partied by something that's not even a real player makes it even more annoying. I hated fighting around these things in competitive. In public matches and arena, I think they were manageable because there was, like, you know, not really any stakes. I still find them annoying, especially nowadays with bosses that have like so much health and can actually do so much damage low-key. But in tournaments, if I gotta fight griefed because a fucking AI either took some of my health or made me use my mats or ruined my element of surprise, it was super frustrating. And the other element of the NPCs was of course where they spawned at the mythic item locations. And these locations weren't the problem this season. I think these POIs were actually really good. It was the mythic weapons that I really didn't like. Because if you had these, especially the mythic scar and grappler, then your chances at winning the game or placing like top 10 were way higher than every other person in that lobby. Now, you can definitely make the argument that getting these guns to begin with was a challenge, and you would be right, but the game I think took on the same problem as Season 10 in Chapter 1. With the special POIs, it was either you land at the mythic locations and deal with the annoying AI, as well as other players, or you put yourself at a huge disadvantage to people who got those weapons and wanted to deal with that bullshit fighting off spawn. And I really don't see how that's much better than Chapter 1 Seasons 2 through 8, where pretty much any POI you landed at, you were still gonna be on somewhat equal footing with players who landed somewhere else. Like if you landed Pleasant Park and someone else landed, you know, Tilted Towers, while Tilted technically had better loot like spawns and drops, you could still leave Pleasant Park or Retail Row with like a similar, if not just as good loadout. And when I said earlier that mouse and keyboard players may have had a point when it came to the aim assist buff, I was specifically talking about controller players with the mythic drum gun, minigun, AK, and the mythic scar. It felt like this season was made for controller players, and me, being a controller player this time, I absolutely abused that damn scar. In duos, I landed at the shark, and while I was still dealing with my controller problems at the time and it breaking, when me and my duo made it out of spawn and won the fight for the mythic weapons, we would just get on high ground easily with that grappler, and I would absolutely rail people with that damn mythic scar. Anytime we had those, it was basically a guaranteed top 10 placement with over 10 kills. And if we had another loadout or died off spawn or didn't land there because of too many people landing there in a certain game, it was much harder to do that. Which is why I think the mythic stuff was such a big problem in competitive. And the final problem with this season was the introduction of bot players in public matches. And this didn't affect me back then because I never played in public matches, but goddamn does it make this game so fucking boring nowadays. I just will never enjoy fighting bots in public matches, and the only reason they're in the game is for scrubs to feel good about themselves. When the real problem that Epic and no other game has actually figured out is how bad skill-based matchmaking is. But while I hate these changes that would impact Fortnite heavily going forward, the two things I still appreciate about Season 2 was 1, the loot pool was still really good outside of the mythic weapons and items, and 2, this season probably had the most amount of tournaments compared to any other season, which was really fun for me. But then we got to Season 3, which was pretty much the last straw for me when it came to playing this game. This season still had the same issues that I talked about and I hated about Season 2 when it came to mythic weapons and NPCs, to a slightly lesser degree as the mythic stuff wasn't as broken this time around. It was still broken, but it just wasn't as bad as it was in Season 2. But they still gave you a big advantage, especially if you had the mythic shockwave launcher and mythic charged shotgun, and the mythic chug jug, which was an infinite chug jug. And while the drum gun got nerfed, which made it not broken, actually. I didn't think the mythic drum gun was actually that broken. You still had a grappler, which is, you know, busted for late game end games. But my other problems with this season was it had the map completely covered in water for a super long time, which made building hell. They added even more NPCs with the sharks that did like way too much damage and could also grief your fights just like the henchmen. And on top of that, the FNCS for this season was solos, which was my least favorite game mode. So I started off this season really pissed, and I never quite got over that as the season continued. I still had fun playing the other tournaments that were trios and duos, and funny enough, I was probably able to use my scuff controller for longer during this season than I ever did in previous seasons. But that doesn't mean that it didn't break, because of course it did during solo FNCS. But even though this season I got used to that controller, there was something off about the game for both my skill level and the game, which is the thing that I hated the most about this season, the charged shotgun. I already didn't like the combat shotgun replacing the pump in Season 9. So what they did in Chapter 2, Season 3 was they replaced the pump with a gun that had the same issue of the gold and purple like pump in Season 1 being so much better than the rarities below it that I talked about earlier. Less of a hit spread, did more damage, could one-shot, etc. But the charged shotgun also completely changed gunplay, because the charged shotgun just felt so much more clunky to use than the pump. And on top of that, they nerfed aim assist this season, which made a bunch of controller players take a hit, because the problem was never that aim assist was too broken. The problem was that aim assist was broken when you had mythic weapons. And you could probably make the argument that if you had like a P90 or a blue SMG, it was kind of broken too. But even if you could make that argument, the problem wasn't aim assist. All you had to do was keep aim assist the same way it was, so that we didn't have such a big disadvantage still with mouse and keyboard players, and just rework the weapons so that they weren't so, spray heavy. But even though I eventually got used to the aim assist nerf and the charged shotgun, for the first time in 4 seasons at this point, I reached a point where, while I was still able to contend with like the best teams in the world in trios and duos, I couldn't do that anymore on my own, like I could before. You see, my role in my teams was usually a mix of IGL and late game fragger. For those that don't know what that means, IGL is basically the person who calls the shots in terms of everything, like when the team would rotate, where we would position ourselves, when we would fight, etc. Because I was really smart in that role, and most of the time, most of the teams that I played with, I felt like I understood when to do certain things better than the people I was playing with. But when it came to late game, I passed that role off to someone else on my team. Most of the time it was a mouse and keyboard player, because as a controller player, my biggest strength in that part of the game wasn't making tunnels for my team to weave through and building like late game. I could still tarp and like make tunnels for my team when I needed to, but my biggest strength was again aiming and finding picks to either get my team more resources or just to get kill points. But my problem with this season was the fact that I couldn't get as good as the best players in the world when it came to using the charged shotgun, especially now that aim assist was nerfed. And so I could stay in my comfort zone in a team game mode by using the tac shotgun still, and I could still be really effective. But when it came to me as an individual, the charged shotgun and the clunkiness and the playstyle change that had to happen when using it, I couldn't adapt. And while at the time I did just chalk it up to a skill issue, I still look back at it now and think, well, not only was I at a huge disadvantage playing on a controller at the time, but I also think now something that I still kind of thought at the time. And that's the fact that I wasn't practicing as hard as I used to be able to adapt to the meta changes like I used to. And that's because I couldn't stand using the charged shotgun. A lot of the time that I spent this season was played in creative mode, and I would just still be using the pump, because the pump made the gunplay the best. It was so much smoother, and the playstyle was so much more fast-paced and not clunky at all, which was how I played Fortnite for the entire time I spent playing Fortnite pretty much, even when the combat shotgun was introduced. So what I realize now, looking back at my problems with Season 3, while I still think there were objective issues with stuff like the mythic weapons and NPCs, my biggest grievance with this season came down to me just not being as good as I once was due to factors such as not wanting to adapt to the new meta, aim assist being nerfed, and my stupid scuff controller breaking in the middle of FNCS. It's harder for me to say that this season was objectively worse than previous ones on all fronts, because my biggest grievances were personal, but what I can still say I think made this season worse, and what I think is my ultimate conclusion as to why I no longer like Fortnite as much as I used to, is the simplicity and balance that the game had in chapters seasons 2 through 8. Back then, there were still items and weapons in those seasons that sure needed some balancing, but the thing about those broken items, like the drum gun in Season 5 for example, is that it wasn't some overly convoluted task like fighting NPC henchmen and real players to open a vault and, killing a boss to get mythic items. Back then, those items were still common, so it kind of reached a point where it was like, so many people have this drum gun in the lobby, was it really that broken? And if it was so easy to get 2 pumps in Seasons 1 through 4 when double pump was still a thing, was double pump really that broken? And nowadays, Fortnite has so many things, big and little, that were either changed or added that I just don't like about the game. The main menu is so convoluted now and much harder to navigate as opposed to previously, where creative maps were codes that you could type in, and all the stuff people would create in creative were separated to creative hubs, and it wasn't just this blob of mess on the main menu. My other, probably the biggest issue with this game that I've had is the game lost its identity. Doing constant collabs, completely changing the art style. I mean, like, you look at the item shop nowadays and it's just filled with unoriginal licensed stuff. They added in so many new modes that are just half-baked, like Fortnite Festival, half-baked Guitar Hero, Rocket Racing, also a very half-baked mode. A first-person CSGO ripoff, also very half-baked. And Lego Fortnite, which is literally just Minecraft dropped it if it was worse. And I think adding all these new game modes, while technically you could argue it adds more content and, you know, stuff to the game, which technically makes it better, what it also does is splits the player base. And it also splits attention from the dev team at Epic. There's still boss fights now with NPCs to get broken mythic weapons, which just distracts from the original intent of the game, being fighting real people in a 100-person lobby. But now a huge chunk of the lobby is hot dropping these mythic POIs and spending a huge chunk of their time fighting the bosses and players that landed there just to get these mythic weapons. The base movement now feels more clunky and slow. Your character runs like they have a dick in their butt. There's now wall jumping, there's wall climbing, super sprinting, sliding, stamina, bullet drop, perks, attachments. There's cars that are incredibly broken movement options that have way too much health and are just an easy escape for someone out of a fight. Like, you can just drive to someone you find, get into a fight, and if you get low or mess up, you can just run back to the car that you had and drive away. And you'll probably not take any more damage because it's super hard to hit people in cars, which takes away a lot of the risk when fighting, and making someone use potentially a bunch of resources against you just for you to be able to run away easily. The map nowadays is just so unnecessarily big compared to how it was in Chapter 1 or even Chapter 2. And of course the fact that public matches are just filled with players that aren't even real. And you might say to me, well, you can just go play the OG Fortnite mode. But can I really? Because I'm not gonna act like Fortnite Season 1 is special nowadays. It was special back then when it was new, but the game made significant improvements as the seasons progressed in Chapter 1. So we don't have those improvements that, like, you know, Prime Fortnite had. And OG Fortnite is still plagued with a worse movement system and bots that completely fill the lobbies. So before I end this video, I will give my ideal solution to Fortnite to make it the best I think it would possibly be. And this version of the game would be something that replaces Fortnite OG, and I would just call it, I don't know, Fortnite Prime. And Epic could do whatever bullshit experiments they want when they're other separate battle royale mode for current Fortnite. First things first, I think the map would either be the Season 5 map or the Season 8 map, or it could just be kind of like a mix between the two. There would be cars, but they would only have 200 HP, and they wouldn't be able to break builds or do damage to players, which I think would make the cars both a good addition and balanced. There would be rifts at every major POI in the game. Siphon would be back in the game, getting 50 health for every kill, and this would also go for public matches. So you would get 50 health for every kill and 50 of every material in the game. I'm sure some of you know how Siphon works. The reason I would keep this in the game is because it limits RNG and it also limits third-party griefing. And I would also make the material gathering double and the limit to 500 like it is in Arena or ranked mode. The movement would be back to how it was in Chapter 1 and 2, with the only new additions I would add is the slide mechanic, as I think stuff like wall jumping and mantling takes away from the style of fighting that the game had in its prime, because now people who are worse than you at building can just pop up out of nowhere and just climb up your builds to get a cheeky shot off, which I fucking hate when that happens. It's really annoying. And I think fighting felt a lot better in Chapter 1 and 2 when those mechanics weren't in the game. Reboot vans would also be in the game as well, but they would be more separated around the map. Like, they wouldn't just be limited to every POI. There would be like stuff, there would be reboot vans in between POIs as well. Upgrade benches would be in the game still to limit RNG, and so would vending machines. And I also wouldn't mind keeping in the NPCs that you can like give gold for like a shield pot or something. I wouldn't mind that. I think those are fine. There would be no bullet drop, there would be no perks, there would be no attachments. Fishing would be in the game. The swimming mechanics that Chapter 2 had would be in the game. And the loot pool, which is probably the most important thing, would look like this. So we have no broken guns, no broken healing items, and no broken movement items. But I want to clarify some things here. First of all the weapons on the bottom left that are mythic, or I forget the other, the special ones, the teal ones. All of those items are the ones that I don't really think are broken, especially if they are rare. And what I mean by rare in this case is these items would only spawn once and they could spawn at randomly throughout the map. For the pump, I would keep the damage numbers the same that they were in Seasons 7 through 10 of Chapter 1. For the combat, it would have the same stats as it did towards the end of Season 9 when it got buffed. And for the grenades, I would limit it to only have 4 per stack. If all of this was done, I feel like it would take the game back to its more simple roots, where anyone could land at any POI and never have a way bigger chance at winning than another. Because at the end of the day, I think when Fortnite is at its best is when it's simple, less RNG based, and has great balancing. What made Fortnite special in my opinion was how simple it used to be, and the unique identity that it made for itself. Even when they added in content updates with wacky items or guns, majority of the time nothing was game breaking or gave someone a massive advantage. And I think the main reason that Epic started adding things like mythic weapons or just broken items in general was so that casual casual players could compete with better players who were either pro or just really good at the game. But in doing that, it never made the game easier for casuals, because no matter what advantage they ever tried to give casuals, and they will ever try to give casuals, good players and pros would also have access to that same advantage. So then it makes it even harder for casuals if someone better than them has that advantage. I think the hard thing that Epic failed to come to terms with, and even like a lot of the casual player base can't come to terms with, was that in Epic's case, they made a game, and in the casuals case, they played a game and fell in love with the game with such a high skill ceiling and so many things to take into account. Aiming, positioning, movement, rotating, building, editing, and map knowledge. And this was the beauty of what the game molded into. Players took the simple system that was building and evolved it so much to the point where it was still a simple system at its core, but there were so many different things you could pull off with it that it still allowed for a massive skill ceiling. I don't think there was ever a flaw in the game that people were just blatantly better than you. That was never a flaw in the game. If you wanted to play the game casually, that's fine, but if you're gonna complain about people like, you know, outbuilding you and full boxing you, then it's either play a different game or get better. Another solution to this is Epic just making a skill-based matchmaking system that actually functions, and taking out bots from lobbies, because having people fight against bots doesn't actually make them better at the game, it just makes them kill bots. The counter to this problem that Epic tried was zero build mode, but I think in adding that mode they fucked up the game even more for casuals that still liked build mode, and even pros that like build mode. I 100% believe, and there's no convincing me otherwise, that the reason Epic changed the movement system in this game as much as they did was to cater to zero build, because the previous movement system was not made for zero build. I mean, even trying to play the OG map zero build, it's just blatantly obvious that that map is not made for zero build. It's just not, because the game was never supposed to have zero build. They only added it in to cater to people who weren't good at building. But the problem with like adding all these new mechanics and stuff is that it makes the game stray away from the simplicity that it had and what made it so good in those earlier seasons. So now playing build mode with all of these new movement mechanics makes it even more complicated to get good at the game, and it still doesn't matter if a casual has zero build to fall on, because no matter what game mode a casual plays, a good player will still always have a way better chance at performing better than a casual one, builds or no builds. And again, things like bullet drop, perks, attachments, broken weapons, NPCs, and all the other extra bullshit that they add, it just makes the game less simple and less balanced. But for my final closing thoughts this video, even though I no longer enjoy this game as much as I once did, and probably never will, I still have fond memories from when this game was starting to fall off for me. Things like killing known pros in both tournaments and scrims. I wagered people like Tfue and other known pros. I won a game in a tournament for people who lived in New Jersey and New York, and I got this funny moment.
Drizip, who's holding it out right now, definitely doing a good job, and Tab's gonna fall there as well, so it's not gonna be successful. Here comes the Stinker, so good in the end game when the cluster is high here, Golden. These Zip, there's shockwaving players out.
Yeah, and Drizip has the shockwave launcher, but he actually drops down low and takes some damage. Doesn't have anything to heal up with, so he needs to be careful. But they're going to play this one out, and he's going to look to use that shockwave. Doesn't have much of an opportunity, but he gets in there, and there you have it. They lost their teammate, little tech support, a little earlier, but it's Drizip and your new stepdad.
I got to meet people who I knew from Discord for years, going to in-person LAN tournaments up in North Jersey. I have so many fond memories of my time playing competitive Fortnite, and even fonder memories playing the game in seasons like 3 through 8 of chapter 1, because that's when I started playing, was season 3. This game taught me what it meant to have a goal in life, doing something that I like and chasing that. It gave me the chance to make money doing something I liked, and I could stop asking my mom to have to buy me everything so much when I was like 15 years old. And without this game, I don't know where my mindset would be in life right now. I definitely wouldn't have this YouTube channel right now, that's for sure. But being able to chase a goal and how to actually pursue that, if I have a chance at it, like realistically, was probably the best thing that this game ever taught me and did for me. And I'll be forever grateful of that. I will also be posting a video with all the Fortnite montages, like the full versions with the music and audio that you see in the videos, like that I've been playing the whole video, except for the Instagram ones. It's about 42 minutes of montages that I will be uploading for my channel members. So if you enjoyed this video and would like to see that, or just get most of my videos early, then feel free to become a channel member for as little as $1 a month. I thank you all for watching, and yeah.